Part 4 of the epic CHAPPiE MOOSE model kit build. We're doing some weathering, some assembling, and lots of painting. I think that it's so much that it's basically all of it, and it's a lot, so let's go. One thing I definitely wanted to add to the gold parts that I had painstakingly painted and repainted many times in this build is weathering. This technique just takes all of the small molded details and pulls them out so they are even more dramatic. This is one kit that is absolutely jam-packed full of these tiny little details, and adding this weathering just makes all of those little details stand out that much more. This technique is super easy to do. I'm just taking some black oil paints and you just coat over most of the part, and then you just wipe away all the excess, and everything that you can't get to in the crevices and cracks is left behind. Most of the gold pieces are mechanical and or part of the engine, and I think adding this weathering layer really just gives it this depth of realism. After wiping away, having some of this black staying in the crevices and cracks really makes it look like there's a bunch of old oil and dirt and grease that has been built up over time, and it makes it look so much more realistic. Another key thing it does is cover up a lot of the flaws in my very not perfect paint job. As you guys know from last time, I really wasn't happy with how the paint was covering over the previously gold painted parts, so I scraped away a lot of that paint to redo it. Another thing I really wasn't happy with after looking at it for a while was the gold accents on the camo armored parts. Since I was already repainting a lot of the parts anyway, I figured if I'm going to make a change, now is the time. My reasoning is that I already have so much gold going on, and to me it just looks better when I have a harder separation between the armor camo parts and then the gold kind of mechanical parts. It's a very subtle thing, and it would have been fine had I left it that way, but to me this just sits better, so I'm doing it. For all of these parts here, I'm basically going back to square one and starting over with the camo, which is totally fine because I always think I can do it better the second or third or 10th time. Although admittedly at this point I was pretty burned out with painting. Thankfully, there were at least some parts that I had painted correctly, and I didn't need to go back and scrape away the paint or repaint them in any way. Because I was so sick of painting and repainting at this point, I wanted to do something different and work a little bit ahead and start assembling. I knew it was pretty safe to assemble at least these two major portions of the larger guns on this model. This part right here in particular is the main grenade launcher / net gun. The barrel on this gun is actually made out of real aluminum, which I thought was just really cool that they incorporated actual metal pieces into this kit. This cannon was pretty straightforward to assemble and nothing really gave me too much trouble, but the minigun was a bit more complicated. The grenade launcher, all the pieces are really big. For the minigun, all the pieces are very tiny. These are kind of the biggest pieces of the gun right here. It has tons of these tiny little hydraulic fittings that had to be attached at each point, and there's like 9 or 10 of them. The only real challenge here was that the parts were very tiny, but aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. I actually didn't even intend to make all of these little fittings gold, but I'm glad I did because there are a lot of other accents on this minigun that are gold and they match very well. Speaking of matching gold, this kit comes with a special laser etched piece, and part of that minigun is these little gold vents, and those are actually made out of brass. I didn't know if these were supposed to be separated or not, but I was able to make them lay a little bit flatter when I did separate them, so I just went ahead and did that. And this is how it's looking so far, and I think it's coming out pretty good. Everything seems to be fitting up very nicely, and I was very excited to make this piece because it's kind of like the centerpiece on top of the main hull. The next part was a bit trickier, and that is getting these brass barrels all lined up and having them go through all the other plastic pieces, which are, I guess, kind of like the barrel holders. I should have reamed these holes out a little bit at least before trying to put them in because they fit into these plastic holders very tightly. If they fit even a little bit more tightly, I don't think I was going to be able to assemble these. This also did chew up my fingers quite a bit. They were definitely sore the next day, but it was worth getting this piece together. Another tricky piece on this barrel are the brass ends, and what was weird was the glue dried so much faster than it does on plastic, so you want to be careful about that. I tried to do them all at once, and one of them I couldn't get into the right position. It does bother me, but it's not that far off. Seeing this completed piece did make me very excited about this whole entire build, because up to this point I hadn't assembled really anything other than these two guns on the entire model, and seeing them all painted up, it just looks so cool. So here it is, the entire full painting montage. I pretty much paint all of the pieces in this section. I don't really have a ton of commentary to go over because it's pretty straightforward. It's just me painting everything. This probably took me about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. I don't even really know at this point. This period of time was a complete blur. I was painting and repainting and fixing and touching up, and I repainted the base like 2 times. It was a ton of painting. Pulling off the masks on the grill was very nerve-wracking because remember, this was the old paint and I was very afraid that it was going to come up with the masking tape. The paint did lift a little bit in the surrounding areas, but it was something that I could almost fix entirely. It's still not perfect and it does bother me, but I got it as good as I could. When I was weathering the gold, I noticed that a lot of the parts were pretty dull where I had went over it with the weathering, and I didn't want it to look that dull, so I came up with the technique of weathering, then painting it with clear coat, which brought out more of the gloss. Then I shot some of it again with gold on top of that to bring out more reflectivity. This technique gave me the best of both worlds because I could have things looking very weathered and dirty and grimy, and then on the same piece have things looking very shiny and new and bright. After way too much painting and repainting, I finally got to a place where just about every single part was painted up completely. I am by no means a professional in any way, and these parts are far from perfect, but when you take a look at how they looked when I first started painting, these are looking so much better. Aside from a few touch-ups here and there, I think this paint job came out way better than I had ever expected. I really love the contrast of the flat camo versus the shiny gold pieces, and this came out better than I had envisioned all the way back in part 2. But I'm really curious about what you guys think. I know this is a pretty unconventional paint scheme, especially for this type of a kit, but let me know, I'm really curious. To me, painting was the most daunting part of this entire process, and I'm going to be honest, I am pretty happy that I have this in my rear view. I did learn a bunch of things, and I have much more experience with painting model kits now just from this one kit alone. But I am very excited to be moving forward and finally getting on to the final assembly. That's right, in the next episode I will be completing this entire build and it will be finally fully finished for you to see. I want to thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. I have a bunch more projects, some much larger projects in the works, so stay tuned for those as well. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.